If you've ever been in an earthquake, you know that they're not at all like what you see portrayed in the movies. I live in Southern California, and the potential of the big one happening in my lifetime is one of the main reasons I begin to take emergency preparedness, aka prepping, so seriously. I've lived through enough small ones while living here, and it's a threat that constantly hangs over your head living in this region. The ones I have experienced so far, they're typically localized events that last from about 10 to 30 seconds, but don't have to be the big one for water, electricity, and gas systems to have failures. So it is essential to prepare for even the low rumblers. A magnitude 9 earthquake can last for 5 minutes or longer and can leave few, if any, buildings or bridges still standing. The people who prepare for an earthquake are usually just the people who live in a zone where earthquakes are frequent. But it would be wise to prepare even in zones where earthquakes are infrequent, but fault lines are within the region. If the big one doesn't occur, though you will see after this video we're long overdue in some areas, you should still have an emergency supply kit to adapt to other natural disasters readily. This video will cover what an earthquake is and why it is so damaging, the major US faults and seismic zones, and the unknown fault zone humans are activating. In the second video of this two-part video series, I'll provide you with the straightforward basics of what you should put together in your earthquake kit. So let's jump in. Please consider subscribing to our newsletter by clicking on the link in the description and comment section below. If you enjoy this video, please subscribe and click the like button to help the channel grow. What is an earthquake and why prepare? First, here's a brief lesson on what an earthquake is, so we can get into this fully understanding what we are up against. An earthquake is defined as a sudden and violent shaking of the ground, sometimes causing great destruction as a result of movements within the Earth's crust or volcanic activity. Basically, where two large volumes of land or rock meet each other, a fraction zone occurs. This is referred to as a fault line. Faults allow the two large blocks of rock to move relative to each other. Sometimes this movement is in very small and unnoticed smooth sliding. Sometimes they stick or hang up for a bit of a period, build pressure, and then release in a more significant movement as a rock on one side of the fault suddenly slips with respect to the other. The resulting dramatic movement of even a few inches or feet can result in an earthquake. To understand the type of shake, fault lines are classified. There are many types of faults classified by the movement of the blocks of rock up, down, left, or right, relative to each other. The specific tectonic process at work within each of the areas I will cover in this video, I will address as I define them. The final thing you need to know about earthquakes concerning their classification is their magnitude. Earthquakes are measured by magnitude and intensity. Intensity is a measure of the overall shaking and damage and can vary by location based upon the land's makeup. The other well-known measurement is a magnitude. This was measured using the Richter scale from 1 to 9. The Richter scale only measured the most significant amplitude of a quake, so seismologists have replaced it with a moment magnitude scale, which measures different parts of the earthquake. It's based on the modified Mercalli intensity scale and lists earthquakes on a scale of 1 to 12. The movement magnitude scale measures the body wave magnitude and surface wave magnitudes and the Richter scale magnitude at the localized level, and then presents a more comprehensive number that defines a wave's magnitude. There's a lot that goes into it, so it can be better understood by understanding the numbers 1 through 9 on the Richter scale and the extent of the damage that can occur from each of them from the Mercalli scale. Throughout the world, it is estimated that 500,000 earthquakes occur per year. The Earth is constantly shifting, but most of these movements go undetected because their magnitude is so low or it occurs in remote places. When it comes to low magnitude, a magnitude 1 quake, you probably wouldn't feel anything even if you were sitting in a stable environment. The Richter scale goes from 1 to 9, and not to oversimplify it, but each level is about 10 times greater than the level before it, and has about 33 times the amount of energy being released. If you get to 9 on the scale, the equivalent energy release is comparable to 20 trillion tons of TNT. The bomb dropped on Hiroshima was between 13 and 15 kilotons, so a 9 on the scale is almost inconceivably larger than that historic blast. When you consider that there are 1,000 thousands in a million, and that there are 1,000 millions in a billion, and 1,000 billions in a trillion, then multiply the whole thing by 20, and well, let's just say that the Earth is a pretty powerful ball of built-up kinetic energy. Be thankful that these minor quakes occur, so a big one is less likely. But what are the destruction at each level? The modified Mercalli intensity scale defines this well. It correlates to the Richter scale but measures the intensity and the resultant aftermath. It has 12 levels. At levels 1 and 2, it isn't felt except under the most optimal conditions. Level 3 may be felt by few people not engaged in movement and on the upper floors of buildings. Level 4 is light and can be felt by many indoors. Dishes may rattle. It may sound like a truck driving by or striking a building. Level 5 and above is felt by everyone in that area. At level 5, some damage to dishes, objects, and windows may occur. Level 6, defined as strong, can actually move heavy furniture and will cause slight damage. At level 7, poorly constructed or older buildings will start to see some damage. Level 8, and that damage is severe. Only earthquake-reinforced structures will likely sustain no damage. Level 9 is severe. Chimneys and factory stacks will fall and some buildings will collapse. Level 10 is extreme. Some well-built wooden structures will be destroyed. Most masonry and frame structures will be destroyed with their foundations. Gas lines without automatic seismic shutoff valves installed are likely to break. Levels 10, 11, and 12 are all categorized as extreme. They're equivalent to a long earthquake at an 8 or 9 on the Richter scale. At level 11, broad fissures can open up on the ground. Maybe not as extreme as you see in the movies where they're eating up people, but still capable of causing radical damage. At level 12, equivalent to a 9 or above, and nothing is left undamaged or possibly even standing. Destruction is total. Every municipal system, water, electricity, gas, sewer, communication, transit, and so on, will sustain damage, interruptions, and possibly seismic failure for an indeterminate length of time. The seismic waves can be seen traveling across the landscape, across the surface, and objects are thrown into the air. Fortunately, these massive, once-in-a-lifetime quakes are a rarity. Besides the shaking, an earthquake can cause soil liquefaction, landslide, fires, ground ruptures, floods, and tsunamis with dramatic and devastating effects thousands of miles from the epicenter. You may not live in a tsunami zone, but you can imagine how dangerous it could be if a gas line is fractured and the roads and bridges are impassable. Is your plan for any disaster to bug in and stand your ground? If you are adequately prepared, that might work in most disasters. It may not, though, in the aftermath of an earthquake. If your home and all your neighbors' homes are just piles of rubble on top of a concrete foundation, you may need to leave the area for personal safety and return when fires are out, and water, gas, and electrical lines are repaired or shut off. Whose fault line is it? So, you must prepare for any known fault line you are in proximity to or living above or near. You should always prepare if you are within a few hundred miles of one of these zones. An extreme quake on one of these known fault lines could result in damage and destruction hundreds of miles away. A giant earthquake on Missouri's new Madrid Fault, for instance, could be felt as far as the East Coast, so it is in your best interest to be prepared for the big one. Here is a quick list of known faults in the seismic zones that could have the most significant potential for a sizable earthquake in our lifetimes. Number 1. San Andreas Fault. The San Andreas Fault is well known because it has consistently produced greater than magnitude 6.0 quakes and runs the length of California. There are hundreds of other faults that feed into the San Andreas or bump out of San Andreas. Some of those other faults may actually be more likely to generate a big one. There's a tectonic boundary between the Pacific Plate and the North American Plate, a right lateral strike slip or horizontal motion fault. According to the research done by the scientific community, the San Andreas is way overdue for a big one. Living in Southern California, it is a shadow that hangs over us constantly. The Cascadia subduction zone starts off in Mendocino, California and runs off the coast of Northern California, Oregon, and Washington to the north end of Vancouver Island, Canada. Being way out there in the Pacific might make you feel safe. You will have a false sense of security if you do feel safe, though. Here, instead of moving sideways, the North American Plate is sliding over the top of the Pacific Plate. The Pacific Plate is being forced under the North American Plate and turned eventually into magma while pushing up on the Olympic Mountains and Cascades. This is a millions of years process that is in continual motion. So long as that goes smoothly, there's just an occasional earthquake. When it gets stuck or hung up and then suddenly corrects, massive earthquakes, tsunamis, and even volcanic activity can occur. When it goes off again, seismologists expect a magnitude 9 earthquake to last 5 minutes or longer. According to geologists, the quakes come every 250 years on average, but the intervals are highly variable. Every 250 years or so, a big earthquake of 9.0 is overdue by about 70 years. Unlike much of California, the Pacific Northwest is not as retrofitted and earthquake-proof. A large magnitude earthquake would destroy many buildings and bridges. Number 3, the Denali Fault. It's easy to forget about Alaska and its earthquakes because they're so far up north, not connected to the contiguous United States, sparsely populated, and they have several earthquakes every day. It is worth mentioning here because it is so active and so violent. Like the Cascadia subduction zone, the Pacific Plate is actively sliding under the North American Plate. Magnitude 7, 8, and 9 earthquakes are typical every year along the Aleutian Islands. The Denali Fault, even 2,000 miles or more away from you, is worth watching. Number 4. Salt Lake City Wasatch Fault. The Wasatch Fault is located in central Utah and southeast Idaho, along the Basin Range Province's eastern edge. At least 23 magnitude 7 quakes have hit these segments over the past 6,500 years, an average of a big shakeup every 300 years. The fault zone is overdue for another 7.0. Because of the earthquake's infrequency, most buildings and bridges, as in the Pacific Northwest, are not hardened against earthquakes. Number 5. New Madrid and Wabash Valley seismic zones. In the United States' western regions, earthquake fault lines can stretch for hundreds of miles, and many fault lines often feed into or buttress against more prominent fault lines. However, in the central and eastern United States, faults are clustered together to create seismic zones and are deeper within the Earth. Though the New Madrid Fault is still well known, other seismic zones could release their energy at any time when the conditions are right. Today, a magnitude 7 would destroy many bridges and structures. The area structures are not designed with modern earthquake-resistant methods like shear walls, cross braces, diaphragms, and moment-resistant frames. Not much is known about these fault areas because they are deep within the Earth. What is known is that they aren't dormant, and they have the potential for a 7.0 or greater at any time that could impact a vast region. Number 6. East Tennessee Seismic Zone. Moving even further east is the East Tennessee Seismic Zone. The source of seismic activity in the East Tennessee Seismic Zone is not well known. The zone is located far from the North American continent's edge and represents a mid-continent or intraplate earthquake zone. The known faults are generally ancient, and no active faults reach the surface. While those are not big earthquakes and are not likely to cause dramatic damage, seismologists warn that earthquakes as large as 7.5 are possible. Also, they seem to be occurring with greater frequency and regularity, which brings us to our final fault line, the yet undiscovered fault zone. Number 7. The yet undiscovered fault zones. Unknown fault zones could soon be awakened by man-made activity. This could explain some of the heightened activity in the East Tennessee Seismic Zone. If you've ever seen up close a fault line deep in the earth, you would see that many are identifiable by the superfine sand that runs along them. This is because millions of years of slow grinding have created that fine sand. When we humans engage in fracking by pumping millions of gallons of fluid into the earth, we may wash that fault line buffer away, which results in some slipping. Also, when we pull too much from aquifers, we decrease the downward pressure on the plate that is under the aquifer. This can result in the plate rising ever so slightly and impacting other tectonic movements. Fracking intentionally causes thousands of small earthquakes of magnitude smaller than 1 to enhance permeability. But it has also been linked to larger earthquakes. The largest earthquake known to be induced by hydraulic fracking in the United States was a magnitude 4 earthquake in Texas. Each earthquake causes pressure to be released off one line and transferred to another line or another plate. Reawakening historic fault lines and adding stress to existing ones is probably not the best practice. Beginning in 2009, Oklahoma experienced a surge in seismicity. The surge was so significant that its rate of magnitude 3 and larger earthquakes exceed California's from 2014 through 2017. Texas had a 4.0 magnitude earthquake as a result of fracking. We don't know what the possible cumulative effect of these human activity-generated earthquakes may be. We know that they may occur in areas where the buildings are not hardened off, and the impact of a big earthquake could quickly rise to a catastrophic level. Do you live within 500 miles of one of these zones? If a magnitude 8 or greater earthquake strikes, you can expect massive destruction in areas not hardened off against earthquakes. Even if you live miles from the epicenter, you can expect services to go offline and possibly even refugees from bordering states. Having an earthquake kit prepared in your prepping supplies will help you if the big one does hit, and you can use it for a host of other disasters or even bug out with it. The next video in this 2-part video series, which I'll link to in the description section above and the cards and also in the description and comment section below. Have you ever been in an earthquake? Have old members of your family? If you're not in the United States, do you have earthquakes in your region? Tell us in the comments section below. I read many of the comments and I try to respond to many of them when I can. That's typically within the first hour of releasing the video. If you found this video informative and helpful, please click the thumbs up icon. It's a little thing, but it helps us build our community. I can notify you when other videos become available if you subscribe to this channel. As always, please stay safe out there.